Welcome back, I'm Tedward, and today, thanks to Bond Group, we're starting rear end first because we're driving a 2018 Porsche 911 GT3 Touring, which means there's no wing. I am really lucky because I just drove the 991.1 911R about a week ago, so I've got a really fresh memory of what that car is, and this car essentially exists because of the demand and the love for the 911R when it came out, although it was incredibly exclusive with only 991 examples, so you couldn't get your grubby little hands on it, and at the time it was the only way to get a 6-speed manual GT3. Well, really it was a GT3 RS, slightly detuned engine because it couldn't rev all the way out from what I'm told. Now we're getting some deep dive stuff, but because the 911R didn't have the side scoops that the RS did, they had to detune it and lower that rev limiter. But subsequently, with the 991.2 as seen here in beautiful Brewster green, we're going to get into all the specs. We end up with a 4-liter naturally aspirated flat 6 that makes 500 horsepower, 339 pound-feet of torque, and revs to 9,000 RPM. So it seems that Porsche figured some things out. Now, these are also a little bit more reliable because early GT3s and GT3 RSs of the 991.1 generation seem to have some valve train issues. All of that was essentially solved with these cars, and they were not in limited production. However, they were spec'd differently. Some people did it better than others, and I would wager that this is one of the prettiest GT3 Tourings out there. The GT3 Touring sacrifices the rear wing, so there's not some big flashy aero package in your face. It looks a little more subdued, so only to the trained eye would you know that this is a GT3. Of course, the center exhaust down here gives it away, and this is a Sharkworks exhaust, which is quite loud and beautiful. I like it. We want to amplify this engine. And then inside, this is spec'd beautifully. We've got a 6-speed manual transmission. We have the comfy 18-way seats, which a lot of people go with the carbon buckets, and I love a carbon bucket. I think it makes a lot of sense. But when you buy a Touring, to me, this is kind of the point I'd like to make today, is that this is the daily driver GT3. This is the car that you can bring pretty much anywhere, and when you use these 18-way seats, it just makes it so much more accessible. I've gotten in and out of this car a whole bunch of times today, and it was not cumbersome whatsoever. You do sacrifice rear seats. There are no rear seats. I believe the newest 992 GT3 Touring leaves an option on the table for rear seats. I think that's sacrilegious and against the whole purpose of this car, but hey, the people want what they want. And this one is optioned to the gills. Even these vents, look at the vent slats, they're paint matched in Brewster green, all the deviated stitching looking gorgeous. I'm kind of in love with this car, and it's a damn shame that they hold value so well because I would like one. We drove a black one recently, and that car I would have to sell a couple things to get. This one is just off the table. I don't, when you have a car that's optioned this perfectly, they're going for well in the high $200,000 range, close to $3,000, so that starts to become unobtainium in my financial world. But we also have these gorgeous 20-inch wheels. There's 245 section tires up front, 305s in the rear, and behind them are the steel brakes, which I do think is the move. Center lock wheels, they look great, they're fun, they are a little bit of a pain in the butt if you do run into trouble, however, because you do need the big old bar, and not every tow truck company is going to be able to bail you out of a scenario with these center locks. So you're going to the dealer. We're on Pilot Sport 4S's today, which makes me thrilled because we may be able to put down a little bit of power at 40 degrees Fahrenheit, or a little warmer actually, despite the fact that it snowed last night. When we drove the 911R last week, we were on cup 2s and it was like 30 degrees, so there was really no hope. You'd still get a little bit of storage up front, but first let me just show you in the rear. Not because there's anything particularly interesting to see, but just because under here you get the GT3 4.0. We love to see it. It's beautiful. And what's great is just on paper, this looks the same as a 911R. I actually got a comment on the 911R the other day that said, this car is 97% of a 911R. Why would I spend all that extra money? Well, we share about 99% of our DNA with chimpanzees, and I would say there is a sizable difference between me and a chimpanzee. At least I would certainly hope so. So that's kind of what I want to do today. I want to see what this is like to live with. We want to do a little daily driving. We'll rev it out. We'll experience this gorgeous exhaust from SharkWorks. Thank you, Alex and NorCal. And we'll see, how does it stack up against the fresh memory of a 911R for a fraction of the price, frankly. Oh, yes. So let's jump in and go for a drive. Oh, yes, this one has 7,000 miles on it. I've got the red key. I do kind of wish this was Brewster Green. Not a knock against the owner. It matches the brakes, but hey, who am I to say? Yeah, all the gurgles and pops on the startup immediately let you know that you're not in a regular Carrera. And keep in mind, oh, we'll turn on the sport exhaust. Oh yes. Keep in mind, this is 991.2. Everything went turbos at this point. So this was the way at the time, and still is, the way to get a naturally aspirated 911. And unfortunately, that's gone away. We drove the 50th anniversary from 2014 the other day, essentially a Carrera S or GTS, with a bunch of fun options. But what's special about that car is now it has a 3.8 liter naturally aspirated engine that we didn't really, I don't think, appreciate as much as we should have. And real quick, just for the spec nerds out there, the base price of this car in 2018 was $143,600. This one was optioned out to $187,870. Now, that's a big number, $190 basically for this car in 2018. However, I believe the newest version of the GT3 base price, not a Touring, just a base GT3, $222,000. Am I correct? I'll put a little thing if I'm wrong, but I think that's about the number. So suddenly these are starting to look like, wow, you know what I should have bought in 2018. And you could have put all those miles on this car and not lost a dime. It's gonna be a wet and wild day today. I got my photos out of the way, and it was tricky to keep this thing clean. So maybe after the fact, it would probably be fun to do a car wash video because it is gonna be absolutely filthy. Okay, let's get these windows up. The first thing you notice, I guess if we're playing the comparison game against the 911R, you guys are gonna hate all of the sound of the sand going up through the wheel wells. I'm so sorry, I get it. The first thing you're gonna notice is the feel of the controls. So the steering's a little different, even the shifter feels different than a 911R, and the rev matching. It's good, it's just slightly less rapid. It's slightly less, there's a small delay, and the rev actually is a little different. Let's get out of here. Such a good noise. We're not gonna be able to put down all the power just yet. We still need to get a little heat in these tires. But goodness, this thing is rigid. Oh baby, it's rapid. It's rapid. This thing is crazy. Probably peaked the audio, so I'm sorry if that was a bad take on the audio. I'm going to tune that gain down and we'll get a better take out on some faster roads. But yeah, it's so bizarre getting into a 991.2 Touring and thinking that certain things are delayed or a little slower in comparison to a 911R. But that's the thing. That's what I'm saying is, yes, you can have almost the same DNA, almost the same car, almost the same specifications, and yet they can feel completely different. color in these Honda Pilots, those Trail Sport blues. Oh, it's so good. I thought people worked from home. What's with all the traffic? So a couple lessons learned there. Number one, this thing just revs out forever. If you're not staring at the tach, I probably didn't get to redline because I probably chickened out and shifted a little early. I need to pay attention and just watch it, but I'm looking out the road. The second thing we learned is that in comparison to the 911R, I would say this has a much better traction control system because the way this cut me off was really delicate and it did not stop me from accelerating. So there's a point for the newer version of the software. However, I still just don't think these rev matches are as crisp and immediate. Granted, this doesn't have a single mass flywheel with that reinforced clutch, but look what we're behind. A wood panel PT Cruiser in seemingly perfect condition. Goodness. Never know what you're gonna find out here. All right, I take it back, lots of rust. Those rocker panels are dosed. See that hawk go straight across? Imagine if that's the accident we got into. I'm sorry, I hit a red-tailed hawk. So yeah, we need to exercise a little bit of patience today just because of the conditions. It's a little cool. It's just on the edge of the temperatures reasonable for a PS4S, and it's a little wet. So yeah, maybe in the comments your little thingies are typing away that I drive like your grandma, and that's great. I think your grandma is probably pretty freaking cool if she drives like this. I would love to meet her. Please send me her number. We can hang out. You're not invited. These seats, and I'm going to talk about these seats while we go over some little bumps and ugly stuff. Oh yeah, these seats are great because they're sporty, they're comfortable, they're very adjustable. I think pretty much anybody can get into one of these and find themselves in a comfortable position. Let's see. Never had to use these in a 911 GT3 before. All right, well, there's my my rating of the windshield wiper washers on a GT3 Touring is subpar. They're okay, but that's about as far as that rating goes. But unless you're going to the track all the time with this car, and you likely wouldn't be because you probably would have just bought a winged GT3 or a GT3 RS if you're going to do that, you're not going to need the carbon buckets. I think the carbon buckets look good. They photograph so well, but like, I don't know, on a long drive, like I would love to go spend like 50,000 miles in one of these cars and just like really get the proper ownership experience. And I think I would likely rather spend those 50,000 miles in an 18-way adjustable seat versus the carbon buckets, which it's not a slight against the carbon buckets. The carbon buckets, for what it's worth, are very good. They are as comfortable as you can get for what appear to be an uncomfortable seat. I've spent a lot of time in some uncomfortable seats, and they are phenomenally good. These brakes, man, goodness, you really do gotta, they're not a bitey pad. I would put a bitier pad on this. You do have to really get into these brakes. It's got that block of wood feel, which is reminiscent of the old air cooler days, but still, I think I just want a little more of an attack mode on these brakes right off the rip. Is such a commitment to get to the 9,000. I think I might have even been a couple hundred RPM, like 100 or 200 RPM short. Like that's a little disappointing, but hey, we're doing our best out here trying to keep this thing planted, and I don't have traction till about third, so them's the brakes, baby. So look, is it a 911R? You know, for the money, it's pretty darn close. Maybe not this one. This one is going to be expensive because this one's optioned out to the gills, and it's going to be a little close to 911R money, maybe closer than you'd want. But you can get 991.2 GT3s and GT3 Tourings for around 200. I would wager this one's going to go a bit higher than that. It's half the price of a 911R. It's not half the car of a 911R, but it isn't a 911R. So we got to get that out of the way. And I don't know why this is even a conversation. I think it's just because it came up in my comment section, and I can't stop thinking about it because the numbers all match. You know, it all looks about the same, but the feeling is not the same. I would wager, and I would put my money on saying that the 911R, it feels lighter. It feels a little more race car, and everything else is more immediate, whether it's the shift action, the clutch action, and that's obviously probably a big contributing factor, the single mass flywheel and reinforced clutch on that 911R, which you could likely do on this car and maybe make it less drivable, I suppose. I don't know that it would take to it quite as well. That gratuitous 3.2 downshift, we're gonna call it on this GT3 Touring. And I mean, look, obviously I love this car. I do. It's so fantastic, and it was just really a cool thing to be able to compare and contrast this against its grandfather, the 911R. But you know, Grandpa was the titan of industry that created the thing. This is the son or grandchild of it, and they're just not the same, although both quite successful in their own right and look fairly similar on paper. So that's gonna do it for me. Buy it, please, goodness, buy this. This is Brewster Green. It's perfect. The colors that people went on and spent, you know, this was like a $12,000 color. So that was the difference really too between the 911R days and the GT3 Touring days, is that people started figuring out, oh, I could like specify my car to look a certain way instead of being like, oh, another white car with colored paint, not even painted stripes, just stickers. You know, these are classier in terms of their appearance, and they definitely speak to the personality of the owners. So thank you guys so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. Don't forget to respect the drive, and I'll see you in the next one. Ooh, hill assist. How luxurious.